Today we're looking at the latest iteration of the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon, the now 10th generation of the ThinkPad X1. Overall, there really hasn't been too many improvements or refinements to the 9th gen of the X1 Carbon, but there's definitely some really interesting things to look at when it comes to performance, battery life, heat with the newest generation. So let's jump into it. Like I mentioned, there hasn't been too many changes or really any changes to the actual aesthetic or design of the X1 Carbon. It still comes in that super sleek and minimalist design with the matte black finish that really doesn't attract any fingerprints and still has the amazing 14-inch form factor. Really light as well at 2.5 pounds. So none of that has really changed with the X1. And you also get amazing port selection with this device. I mean, it's really built for professionals, but also at-home users get the extra added benefit of having all of these ports. You get two Thunderbolt 4 ports, which are also acting as your charging port at 65-watt charging, fast charging with the included charger. You're also getting two USB Type-A 3.2 Gen 1 ports, so capable of 5 gigabit per second, which is plenty fast enough for most USB devices. You're also getting a full-size HDMI 2.0 port, which is perfect for making presentations or just wanting to plug in this PC to a TV to watch a movie or just share your screen extremely easily. You also have the possibility of adding a nano SIM slot for a nano SIM card on this device in order to really make the connectivity options endless when you're away from your desk or away from your home. And you also have a microphone headphone combo jack, so you can take full advantage of this device when you're in meetings or listening to music or watching a show. But you might not need to use that headphone combo jack too much because this thing has an extremely sophisticated speaker setup with Dolby Atmos built in. It also has a 4 microphone array around the device to pick up your voice really well when you're using the X1 for video conferencing and things like that. So let's showcase that speaker and microphone setup to give you guys a full picture of what this thing is actually capable of. So here's a test of the quad mic array on the ThinkPad X1 Carbon. Overall, hopefully it sounds pretty good, but while we're here, we should probably also talk about the 1080p built-in webcam on this device, which is crucial when it comes to video conferencing, especially because this laptop is so tailored to business professionals. You don't want people kind of trying to figure out what's on the screen when it comes to looking at your video versus actually listening to what you're saying or looking at the slide that you're presenting. So overall, this 1080p camera is far and away better than the last gen and definitely better than a lot of other laptops at this price point and in this range. So overall, no real complaints when it comes to the speaker or microphone setup on this thing. Like you guys heard and experienced, it really is one of the top performers in its class in this 14-inch size. There's also some really nice display options for the X1 Carbon. So the model that I have here comes with the 1920 by 1200 aspect ratio display. So it's a full HD display with touch sensitivity or touch capabilities so that you can actually use it as a touchscreen. Now, I normally don't love a touchscreen when it's not a complete 360 foldable, more of like a 2-in-1 laptop like a Yoga 9i, but this thing is capable of having a full kind of 180-degree hinge, a little bit past 180, so you can really kind of lay it flat on a table and really use it as a somewhat of a tablet with a keyboard attached. So overall, the touch capability of this display is very usable with the X1 Carbon. The display also gets pretty bright for when you're outside or in well-lit environments, getting up to 400 nits. It's also 100% sRGB coverage, so it's very color accurate if you are going to use it for more of a photo professional or video editing professional. You're really going to be able to use this screen in order to make sure that all of your images or videos are color accurate out of this device. And the other thing that is really nice about this display is that it has ultra low blue light technology. It is eye safe certified to really ensure that you're able to use this device for long periods of time without putting too much stress or strain on your eyes. So overall, the display is very similar to last year, but it also still performs up to par, even better than that, compared to a lot of similar laptops. And the last thing I want to cover before jumping into the performance and battery life of the X1 Carbon is the keyboard and the trackpad. So overall, the trackpad is the same size and layout as the previous Gen 9, but although it's on the smaller side, it's still extremely accurate, very low latency, pretty good when it comes to palm rejection. So overall, no complaints, although I wish it was a little bit bigger, but they have to shrink down the size of the trackpad in order to make room for this full-size keyboard with an entire row of function keys and everything that's really needed when you're trying to use this day to day as a professional. So when it comes to the keyboard, Lenovo did make a few improvements to it, adding a little bit more travel on the key side so that you get a little bit more actuation on each key press. And overall, I mean, this thing just feels really, really nice. It sounds good, it's pretty quiet. It's actually one of the better keyboards I've used on a Windows laptop. And the last little thing I wanted to cover before jumping into the specs is the Windows Hello touch recognition on the power button of the X1 Carbon. It's a really nice feature to just quickly and easily get into your device. But now it's time to jump into the specs and the actual performance of this laptop. So where the Gen 10 X1 Carbon far and away exceeds the Gen 9 is in performance and specs. So overall, it keeps the same 57 watt-hour battery that was in the Gen 9, not the largest capable or capacity battery in a laptop of this size, but it does lend itself well to using this thing on the go. Not as well as last generation and as last year, which I will get into shortly for the reasons why. In balanced mode, I saw pretty good performance on this device, getting around 7 to 8 hours of battery life while browsing or video editing or doing those kinds of tasks on the X1 Carbon. But I could also imagine in certain situations getting even less battery life, closer to 4 or 5 hours with this device in situations where you're really, really using the CPU and GPU inside of the X1 Carbon. And that's kind of the biggest reason for the reduction in battery life compared to last generation, which saw well over 10 hours of battery life in the majority of tests. So the biggest reason for the reduction in battery life is going to be the CPU change from 11th gen Intel to 12th gen Intel in the X1 Carbon Gen 10. So now we get an i7 1260p in this specific device, but you can go anywhere from like an i5 to the i7 in this configuration of the X1 Carbon. And the i7 1260p is no slouch of a processor. I recently reviewed it in the Yoga 9i, but in the X1 Carbon, it is a really power-hungry CPU that requires a little bit of extra cooling and also definitely hits the battery life more than I would have expected in this device. So the 1260p is a 12-core, 16-thread CPU, the newest generation from Intel. It has 4 performance cores, so 4 cores and 8 threads of performance, and then 8 efficiency cores that really lend themselves to peaking the performance inside of a small, light chassis like this one. And in order to get the full performance out of that i7 1260p, Lenovo has paired it with 16 gigs of 5200 megahertz LPDDR5 memory inside of this machine, and you can match that all the way up to 32 gigabytes, but you do have to spec it out of the factory from Lenovo with that capacity. So all of the memory is soldered onto these devices. There's no user upgradability down the line when it comes to memory. But where there is user upgradability is where it comes to the SSD. So this device has a 512 gigabyte PCIe Gen 4 SSD capable of blistering fast speeds. So there's not too much of a reason to upgrade when it comes to the speeds on the device. But if you did want to increase capacity and you didn't want to pay for it out of the factory from Lenovo, that is an option when it comes to upgrading down the line. You could upgrade it to 2, 4, 6 terabytes of PCIe Gen 4 speeds down the line. And there's also some really nice performance when it comes to Wi-Fi and connectivity in general. So like I mentioned before, you can get a SIM slot on this device to connect on the go. When you are connected to Wi-Fi, it has built-in Wi-Fi 6E capable of amazing speeds, especially when you have gigabit internet at home or at work or even higher than that. You can get the full capacity or capabilities of that connection on this device thanks to Wi-Fi 6E. So without a doubt, the Gen 10 X1 Carbon definitely performs better than last year's model, and also just in this price range, in this size and weight, the X1 Carbon performs amazingly well due to the i7 1260p. And although there is that battery hit, you can now kind of count on this device in a lot more circumstances to be dependable when it comes to performance. But there's still a little bit of performance left on the table in the name of lightness and sleekness to really maintain that X1 Carbon kind of overall aesthetic. And if you compare this machine to something like the Yoga 9i, again from Lenovo, just a bigger 16-inch form factor with a much heavier constructed frame, that thing gets around 10% higher performance than the X1 Carbon with the exact same CPU and the exact same RAM. So there's definitely some thermal throttling and just some limitations that Lenovo is putting in. As you guys could see, we pretty much spiked up to 97% utilization. We got up to 4.7 gigahertz, really short period of time on the P cores, and around like 3.4 on the E cores, which is typical of a 1260p, but we immediately dropped down to like 2.2, 2.1 gigahertz on the P cores in order to maintain what seemed to be like a kind of a software cap at around 90 degrees C. But overall, I have very few complaints about the Gen 10 X1 Carbon. Again, Lenovo kind of shows what a laptop can do and what a laptop can be with this machine. But of course, that means it also comes at a pretty high price point. So you can get this thing for a lot of different price ranges. There's a lot of different options when it comes to the X1 Carbon. You can go with Full HD, you can go with a 2.2K OLED, you can go touchscreen, non-touch, you can spec up and down the CPU, as well as the RAM and SSD. So there's a lot of different price ranges. It starts around $1,500, goes up to around $3,500 depending on your spec. This one here is going for around like $2,300 on B&H. So it is a decently expensive laptop, but it's hard to find something with this much performance in this form factor at this weight that isn't, let's say, a MacBook Pro. So I really enjoyed reviewing the X1 Carbon. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching. If you're looking for one of these, I'll have the links down below. If you enjoyed the video, definitely give this thing a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. And if you haven't already, get subscribed to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.